the Bogosity podcast, early and ad-free. Become a subscriber at Patreon, Subscribestar, or Discord. Use the links at donate.bogosity.tv.
Welcome to the Bogosity podcast for the week of August 11, 2024. The podcast that said the boogie, set up, jump the boogie. This is your host, Shane Killian. Let's multi-branchiate the news of the bogus. So the main thrust of this podcast is covering the parts of the news that haven't gotten the coverage they should. For a brief moment, Joe Biden was taking all sorts of credit for the release of 16 Russian prisoners, including several journalists, to the West, saying Trump could not have done so with accolades from the press. Briefly. And then everyone seems to have forgotten about it and moved on to the next thing. But as Brian Krebs covered, these prisoners weren't freed without a price. It was an exchange. 8 Russians were repatriated, and they weren't journalists. In fact, most of them were cybercriminals. For example, in 2017, Roman Seleznev was sentenced to 27 years in prison on several counts of racketeering, mostly stealing and selling credit card data and operating one of the biggest underground marketplaces for stolen credit card data. And he's the son of Valery Seleznev, a prominent member of the Russian parliament and ally of Vladimir Putin. In fact, it was the junior Seleznev's contacts at the FSB that kept him out of prison for so long. Also released in the exchange was Vladislav Klyushin, who was sentenced in September of last year to 9 years for a $93 million hack-to-trade conspiracy, mostly involving illegal stock trades. 4 of his co-conspirators remain at large. The freed prisoners even include Vadim Krashikov, a colonel in the FSB who was serving life for murdering a dissident in exile in Berlin. So it doesn't seem like it was any real amazing feat of strength or policy from the Biden administration that resulted in their freedom. Just the game that Putin's administration plays. The West incarcerates their criminals, they arrest Westerners and give them a sham trial with ridiculous sentences, and then offer them up for trade. So there we are. One more data point as to why you shouldn't trust the news media. And I guess a data point as to why you shouldn't visit Russia. If you're looking for a way to support this channel, but you don't have any spare cash and you can't stand ads, you can do so by generating your own cryptocurrency. Use the links at the bottom of the description to follow the link to Odyssey.com to listen to the podcast and see all of my YouTube videos as well. Just watching videos will produce cryptocurrency for the creator and yourself. And since Odyssey is always monetized and never censored, you'll have no problem seeing all the videos from your favorite creators. You can also use the library credits you create at Odyssey to tip creators and even purchase paid content. Earn library credits through various rewards, including daily view rewards and the number of shares and invites. And you can interact with creators in all sorts of ways, including like and dislike, comment, boost a post by supporting it, repost it, and share to other sites, all while earning crypto for the creator. Easily monetize yourself and your favorite creators using cryptocurrency, without advertising. Use the link below to visit this channel on Odyssey.com and see many of your other favorites there as well. So we've known at least since the Twitter files that the Biden administration and their allies beforehand were using agencies like CISA and DHS to censor material on the internet that went against them, like certain information about COVID and other issues we've covered. We've also talked about advertiser boycotts. The main point we've seen is that as long as you don't kowtow to what the advertisers want, they might boycott you short term, but a couple months later, they come slinking back. And yet, for years, it seems like we've all been slaves to advertisers and what they want. How can that be sustained long term? Simple. Combine the two. Have an organization that's ostensibly private, but working closely with DHS and CISA, and make it the biggest advertising cartel in the world. It's called the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, or GARM, headed by Rob Rakowitz. They represent 90% of advertisers globally, about $1 trillion every year, with every major advertising agency in its ranks, as well as the world's largest media buying company. It covers numerous household names such as Mars, Procter & Gamble, L'Oreal, Nestle, IBM, and many others. According to a report from the House Judiciary Committee, quote, GARM claims that it was created to drive transparency and policies to help companies achieve brand safety, or, in other words, transparency on where ads are placed to make sure that advertisers don't inadvertently support certain content on social media platforms. To achieve this goal, GARM asserts that it works in the content monetization space, defined as what content ads actually support and the practice of insertion of the ads online. GARM disclaims involvement in content moderation, which is the practice and determination of what content is appropriate for hosting, recommending, and making available on a platform. GARM admits, however, that content monetization and moderation are inextricably linked, and lapses in moderation put advertising and advertisers at risk. In other words, GARM's monetization work has the effect of influencing what content appears online. If you've ever wondered why you were demonetized for something that should never be considered a problem, these are the guys. They cover three main examples of ways that GARM has denied certain voices their online expression, the biggest one being Twitter and Elon Musk. Quote, GARM recommended that its members stop all paid advertisement on Twitter in response to Mr. Musk's acquisition of the company. GARM's internal documents show that GARM was asked by a member to arrange a meeting and hear more about GARM's perspectives about the Twitter situation and a possible boycott from many companies. GARM also held extensive debriefing and discussion around Elon Musk's takeover of Twitter, providing ample opportunity for the boycott to be organized. GARM bragged about taking on Elon Musk, and since then, Twitter was 80% below revenue forecasts. Another example was Spotify and the Joe Rogan Experience. Quote, GARM and its steer team threatened Spotify over alleged misinformation on Joe Rogan's podcast, Joe Rogan Experience, because Mr. Rogan stated an opinion that young, healthy people need not receive the COVID-19 vaccine. GARM even admitted it was acting outside of the scope of its work on brand safety because brands aren't being slotted into the podcast. In other words, the companies could easily choose whether to advertise on or avoid Mr. Rogan's podcast, and therefore, GARM had no business interfering in Spotify's decision. So, yes, they were taking the decision away from individual advertisers. And the rest is just anyone with an opposing view. Quote, one GARM steer team member candidly wrote that although he hated their ideology and bullshit, his company couldn't really justify blocking them for misguided opinions. So the company watched them very carefully, and it didn't take long for them to cross the line. Additionally, GARM pushes its members to use news rankings organizations like the Global Disinformation Index and NewsGuard that disproportionately label right-of-center news outlets as so-called misinformation. GARM and its steer team even participated in efforts to label a social media advertisement paid for by President Donald Trump as misinformation. When Facebook would not label the advertisement as misinformation, Mr. Rakowitz told a colleague that it was honestly reprehensible. A GARM steer team member expressed concern about Mr. Musk exposing the truth regarding how Twitter was previously used to censor the Hunter Biden laptop and Biden family influence peddling story, describing Mr. Musk's position as an overtly partisan take. In fact, Rakowitz appears a lot in the report, including his complaints about a, quote, extreme global interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. Yeah, he hates freedom of speech. But the most damning part is its ties to corrupt government censorship. Quote, the federal government, through the Department of Homeland Security's Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, CISA, coerced and colluded with companies and other intermediaries to censor American speech. To the detriment of the American consumer, CISA's censorship efforts relate to GARM and its ad tech partners. CISA utilized GARM ad tech partner Channel Factory to collaborate on a common lexicon to help discuss so-called mis- and disinformation. Global Chief Strategy Officer of Channel Factory, Phil Cowdell, shared the lexicon with Mr. Rakowitz and wrote, "The industry will need a common lexicon and detailed definitions in order to make progress as an industry. Attached is the lexicon we developed with CISA/DHS, which may provide a useful start point." And this is where you get terms like cheap fakes that you may have heard out of the mouths of politicians and pundits. In particular, back before Biden's disastrous debate with Donald Trump and his subsequent withdrawal from the race, White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre used the term to describe videos people were sharing showing Biden's continuing mental deterioration. And yes, of course, this includes YouTube. Quote, "Channel Factory is a member of YouTube's YouTube Measurement Program, or the YTMP. This program is a collection of companies that are carefully vetted and meet YouTube standards. It also means YouTube consider YTMP members to be a trusted business partner in providing the capabilities you need to better drive and understand your marketing performance, inclusive of Google Media. YouTube is one of the largest and most powerful social media platforms, yet it includes in its highly selective YTMP program a provider that collaborates with GARM and CISA on so-called misinformation." After the report was published, Linda Yaccarino, CEO of X, posted, "After a career in media and advertising, I thought I had seen everything. Then I read the House Judiciary Committee's report. The report disclosed that their investigation had found evidence of an illegal boycott against many companies, including X. To put it simply, people are hurt when the marketplace of ideas is undermined and some viewpoints are not funded over others as part of an illegal boycott. This behavior is a stain on a great industry and cannot be allowed to continue." So, she announced, X is filing suit against GARM, their creator, the World Federation of Advertisers, and members CVS Health, Mars, Orsted, and Unilever. And understand, since this was done in collaboration with CISA and DHS, that makes them all state actors. She says they unfairly punished X even after they acceded to every request they made. Quote, "We have met and surpassed the requests made by advertisers and groups such as GARM for new tools, both to improve advertiser controls and the effectiveness of our products to drive increased value for our customers. We have proven our platform provides advertisers a way to showcase their brands and reach their target audiences safely, efficiently, and effectively. The unfortunate reality is that, despite all our efforts, hundreds of meetings, and research to the contrary, many companies chose to dismiss the facts. To those who broke the law, we say enough is enough. We are compelled to seek justice for the harm that has been done by these and potentially additional defendants, depending on what the legal process reveals. It's also clear that there are likely others who suffered at the hands of this activity. This case is about more than damages. We have to fix a broken ecosystem that allows this illegal activity to occur." Elon Musk posted, "We tried peace for 2 years. Now it is war." The ex-Twitterati collectively screeched about free speech and free association as if they suddenly agreed with those principles. Of course, they were also collectively ignoring the government collusion. This is not a case of individual advertisers deciding where they do and do not want to advertise. GARM doesn't even give them that choice unless they happen to be one of the big partners like CVS or Mars. This is about advertisers using agencies which have been herded into a cartel that, on the back end, has been colluding with government to silence people whose opinions are uncomfortable to them. And it's time to get right in the face of everyone who claims otherwise. If you're on the Wi-Fi in a coffee shop or hotel, anyone on that network can get your traffic. Do you really trust all of those strangers? For that matter, do you really trust your ISP? A VPN can protect you from prying eyes, disguise your location, and even foil government censors. It's essential in this day and age, so go to vpn.bogosity.tv and you'll be taken to BoxPN. Starting at just $2.99 a month, you can get unlimited high-speed connections to VPN servers all over the world, and they don't log connections, so your privacy is assured. Traveling abroad, just VPN home, and don't worry about what those other governments are doing. Back at home, stop your ISP from traffic shaping and messing with the quality internet access you're paying good money for. You can connect from multiple machines at once, including your smartphone or tablet, and it supports all the secure standards, including OpenVPN and SSTP. Bypass censors and surveillance with your own secure VPN connection. Go to vpn.bogosity.tv. If recent history is any indication, we're going to have a lot of controversy about the election, no matter who wins, about whether or not it was illegally stolen by one candidate or another. And if all of history is any indication, there'll be a lot of stealing going on. We've been covering the years-long lawsuit going on in Georgia regarding their election systems, especially their voting machines. You remember, the ones that anyone could defeat with a ballpoint pen and get root access to the regional server? So already, Georgia Democrats are warning that bad actors could abuse the new state online portal, which can be used to cancel voter registrations. The Secretary of State has acknowledged at least 2 such attempts, deregistering Marjorie Taylor Greene and Brad Raffensperger. This comes on the heels of both the Associated Press and The Current reporting that the portal has suffered at least 2 security glitches, which could allow attackers to get the date of birth, last 4 digits of the Social Security number, and the full driver's license numbers of registered voters. That information is all an attacker would need to cancel their voter registration. And it's not like that information is all that secret to begin with. The Secretary's office spotted the attempts because they specifically knew that Greene and Raffensperger's wouldn't be canceling their voter registration. But if you're not a high-profile voter, how would they even be able to tell a wrong deregistration from a legitimate one? To let you know how little you can rely on them, Mike Hassinger, a spokesman for the Secretary's office, said, quote, "Can this site be used to cancel a legitimate voter's registration? Yes. In the same sense that it is possible to win a lottery without buying a ticket. The wind could blow the winning ticket into your pocket. Not likely, but theoretically possible." That's going to make anyone familiar with cybersecurity cringe. Of course, hackers don't work randomly. The odds of being randomly dealt a royal flush might be 1 in 650,000 or so, but if you've stacked the deck, the probability jumps to 100%. And hacking is all about stacking the deck in your favor. Raffensperger himself didn't comment. Max Pflugrath, Director of Communications for voting rights advocacy organization Fair Fight Action, said, quote, "Instead of apologizing and working to fix the problem, Brad Raffensperger is denying it exists. If the Secretary of State won't do what it takes to protect Georgians and their voting access, advocates will do everything we can to ensure voters have the information needed to register, cast a ballot, and have their vote count." Georgia Senate Democrats exed, "What the hell is this, Georgia Secretary of State? Canceling voters? This tool empowers conspiracy theorists and other bad actors to deny Georgians the right to vote. We demand this be taken down immediately." I don't know why it would be conspiracy theorists doing the hacking, but yeah, it needs to be taken down. Or, at the very least, standard cybersecurity implemented. A user called Fuzzy Fuzzbutt replied, "Lots of people have their birthday in the public domain. This is insane, Georgia Secretary of State," and followed it up with the birth dates of Greene, Raffensperger, Brian Kemp, Kelly Loeffler, and Mike Collins. The website advises that impersonating someone to cancel their voter registration is a felony punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a $100,000 fine, and therefore a VPN should be used if you're going to try. This portal is being conflated with new legislation making it easier for Georgia residents to challenge voter registrations, but that's a completely unrelated process. I'm predicting it right now. This is the first of many security issues with voter rolls and polling systems that'll be an issue in the 2024 election, though it remains to be seen how many of them we actually get to know about before the election and how many of them we actually get to review afterwards. Going by history once again, the elections will be deemed secure by whoever wins and fraudulent by whoever loses. You heard it here first! Do you have children, or nieces or nephews? Are you homeschooling, or just want to counter some of the socialist indoctrination most children get in school? If so, go to Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins, and you'll be taken to a website where you can get some great books for elementary-aged children. The Tuttle Twins books are books about liberty and free market economics that include children's versions of Bastiat's The Law, Leonard Read's I, Pencil, and Hayek's The Road to Serfdom, as well as books about the Federal Reserve and how regulations protect business cronies. They'll learn about the harm caused by eminent domain, or regulations passed in the name of safety, and fundamental concepts of liberty. And as you can see from the sample pages on the website, they're all easy to read and nicely illustrated. They're just $9.99 a piece, or get a special discount as well as free bonuses when you purchase all 5. You can even buy in bulk to donate to schools and local libraries. So get the Tuttle Twins books at Bogosity.tv/TuttleTwins. And now it's time to insubstantiate this week's biggest Bogon Emitter. And we've covered the policy implemented in several states to require certain websites to verify the identity of their users using government IDs such as driver's licenses. In most states, the excuse is to protect children from porn, although we've covered at least one case, California, where it's all about protecting elections from misinformation. Whatever the reason, it's as unconstitutional as all get out. Only now, they'll have to argue that it isn't to the Supreme Court, specifically Texas's HB 1181, which forces any website with at least 1/3 adult content to verify the age of every visitor. They're one of 8 states that do so, and as a resident of one of those states, I can tell you that instead, websites have opted to shut off access to that state entirely. It's annoying. It takes me a good 12 seconds to get my VPN connected. Such a hassle. So the Free Speech Coalition has sued on First Amendment grounds. They won in the District Court for the Western District of Texas because any laws regulating speech based on conduct are presumed invalid and must pass the strict scrutiny standard to hold up. But the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals found otherwise, applying the lowest form of scrutiny, rational basis review. The problem is that not all speech that is obscene to minors is obscene to adults as well. As Patrick Higginbottom wrote in his dissent, quote, "Protected sexual expression encompasses materials that are appropriate for adults, but inappropriate for minors. For example, scenes from the popular show Game of Thrones, the 1985 film The Color Purple, or the 2011 film The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo all contain depictions of sexual intercourse that may be patently offensive to young minors and regulated under HB 1181, but still offer artistic or cinematic value for adults. While I agree with the majority that HB 1181's plain text applies only to sexual material harmful to minors, the statute cannot be reasonably read to regulate only obscene content. In the words of the District Court, HB 1181 goes beyond obscene materials and regulates all content that is prurient, offensive, and without value to minors. In doing so, the law infringes upon adults' protected sexually expressive speech. In every similar case that's come before it in the past, the Supreme Court applied strict scrutiny. Texas wants to get around it by saying that the law only applies to children and therefore doesn't chill the willingness of adults to visit adult websites. The problem is, a lot of people don't want to hand over vital identifying information to websites. They value their privacy in this matter above most others. But what happens if there's a hack or a leak? As we've said in the past about similar measures such as KYC, what happens when one of these databases of everyone's government-issued IDs gets hacked and put on the dark web? We just got through covering a story of one possible bad thing that could happen if this information gets out, and that's barely scratching the surface. Texas swears up and down that age verification is secure, but we just saw how seriously you should take claims like that. It'll also be difficult to square that with a previous court case that found that Pornhub collected too much information about its visitors. In addition to all of the normal issues that come about from hacked information, which in some cases can be life-altering, with adult sites, there's the added specter of blackmail on top of it, and we've covered that before with other data leaks of adult sites. So, this is going up to the Supreme Court, and the decision will affect similar laws in other states, including Arkansas, Utah, Montana, Mississippi, Louisiana, North Carolina, and Virginia. SCOTUS has granted the Free Speech Coalition's petition for certiorari, and there are a number of amici briefs, including from American Booksellers for Free Expression, the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the EFF, FIRE, and others. The deadline for all briefs is November 15th, so we'll see what happens from there. So all of that makes Texas and these other states this week's biggest Bogon Emitter. I want to tell you about the eyeglasses I've been wearing for years. As people can see on my videos, I have a very strong prescription, which makes glasses more expensive, especially when I need computer glasses, reading glasses, prescription sunglasses, and most expensively, progressive lenses for general everyday wear. To save money while still getting quality glasses, I get them from Firmoo. In fact, I just got a pair of progressives with high-index aspherical lenses and a nice pair of frames my wife loves for just over $100. It would have been $500 to get them through my eye doctor. Not only do they look good, the glasses are durable. I've worn many pairs for several years without problems. All orders come with a 30-day return policy, a 3-month warranty, and one-on-one customer service. Go to Firmoo, that's FIRMOO.Bogosity.tv anytime you need quality glasses at a low price. Once again, that's Firmoo.Bogosity.tv. And now let's thymectomize this week's Idiot Extraordinaire. And it's the UK again for more stupid IP tricks, this time with trademarks. 10 years ago, they denied a woman access to an airline, her passport having been denied because her middle name was Skywalker and it infringed on Disney's copyright of Star Wars. Despite the fact that nothing about a name or passport is creative expression or anything that can be copyrighted. After being rightfully derided by the entire internet for their complete idiocy, you'd think they'd make sure such a thing didn't happen again. But no, they've denied a passport for a woman's 6-year-old daughter, preventing the two of them from traveling to Paris. This time, it's because her daughter's name is Khaleesi, named after Game of Thrones. Officials actually said that they couldn't give the woman a passport until she got permission from Warner Brothers. The woman said, quote, "I was absolutely devastated. We were so looking forward to our first holiday together. But then I had a letter come through from the passport office saying her name is trademarked by Warner Brothers. It was the first I've heard of such a thing. I was astonished." And yes, she received a birth certificate for Khaleesi, no problem. Her solicitor said that, while Warner Brothers does have a trademark for Khaleesi, a word for the wife of a Dothraki warlord, as anyone who's not a complete moron knows, it's for goods and services, not a person's name. The purpose of a trademark is to protect the public from being confused as to the source of a product or service. When you buy a drink called Pepsi, you want to know what you're getting, so not just anyone can call any old drink Pepsi. But there should be no problem naming your kid that. Otherwise, every girl named Portia or Sierra would have a problem. Same with boys named Lance or Reese. Hell, my own name is an Alan Ladd movie. It was only after she posted to social media and the passport office got yet another round of internet derision that they finally apologized and said they could process her daughter's passport. So, this isn't in any way the fault of Warner Brothers, but it does show the cult-like mind cancer that IP ends up instilling in people. The entire concept of owning ideas, drawings, or phonemes is an assault on thought itself. No wonder those who believe in it have so much trouble thinking. So all of that makes the UK this week's
Idiot Extraordinaire.
Well, that wraps up this I think I'm going to need a bigger flowchart edition of the Bogosity podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please go to donate.bogosity.tv for several ways to support and discord.bogosity.tv to join the discussion. Subscribe at the Discord or at Patreon or Subscribestar, and you can listen early and ad-free. Thank you for listening. Until next time, here's a quote from George Bernard Shaw. All censorships exist to prevent anyone from challenging current conceptions and existing institutions. All progress is initiated by challenging current conceptions and executed by supplanting existing institutions. Consequently, the first condition of progress is the removal of censorship. The Bogosity podcast is licensed under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License.
Bogosity.